Happy anniversary to Final Fantasy XVI, one of my favorite games of all time. It's been far too long since I've made a proper video on this game, so let's get right into it. I wonder what this one's gonna be about. Hang on, let me just double check the script. Excuse me? Final Fantasy XVI is an absolutely perfect game with zero flaws, and anyone who criticizes it is just a filthy hate. I'm kidding. I just needed a joke for the intro. Final Fantasy XVI is a great game. Like I said, it's one of my favorites ever, maybe my favorite of all time, but it is far from flawless. I felt this when I first played the game, and I feel this now looking back at it 2 years later. To make a quick comparison that'll make more sense in a minute, Final Fantasy XVI is the Sonic Frontiers of the Final Fantasy series. A modern entry in a long-running series with a new and somewhat controversial gameplay style. A game that has some quite notable low points, but some exceptional highs, with a focus on spectacle and feeling cool over all else. Final Fantasy XVI in many ways feels like a first draft for a new system, like Batman Arkham Asylum or, like I said, Sonic Frontiers. All the ideas are here, and what we have is pretty great, but it could easily be tweaked a little with the benefit of hindsight in a sequel to be truly legendary. This game will never get a sequel, because that would be impossible with the way that the story ended, but who knows, someday it may just get a remake. I mean, it didn't take Naughty Dog very long to start milking this cow again. So let's use some hindsight and give some feedback. How I feel that Final Fantasy XVI could have been improved to go from a great game to a truly perfect one. But what's the fun in just giving my own takes? I have a whole channel full of that already. I tweeted out asking for people to give me their thoughts on how Final Fantasy XVI could have been better, and I would include those takes in this video. For the record, my average tweet reception looks a bit like this, so I really wasn't expecting much. Oh my god, this is... wow. I'm amazed, and immensely grateful, but this is quite literally 20 times the response that I expected. I don't think I can take this one on alone. I need some help. Of course! I'll get Limitless, my old friend and fellow Final Fantasy fanatic. Oh, he's busy. I guess he's still off playing Expedition 33 or being hyped over the Persona remake. But how can I bring him here? Ooh, hang on. I've got an idea.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
So because this response is frankly incredible, I can't break down every single tweet in detail. What I can do is group them into basic categories and talk about the general ideas contained within, using the responses for examples to make my points even stronger. I think that's fair. So, without further ado, let's begin. Final Fantasy XVI, the 2-year retrospective. The most common talking point by fans by far is the combat. I love this system, swapping between 3 icons with cooldown based powerful strikes and available at all times iconic feats, mixing a large variety of moves together to form awesome combos in between swordplay, aerial maneuvers and tense dodges. Or at least that was the intention. I'm not getting into Final Fantasy XVI should have been turn-based. That's fundamentally rebuilding the game's combat from the ground up, and that's not the point of this video, nor is that something I'd want for this game anyway. I have also made a video in the past defending this game's combat design alongside Limitless, and how it can actually encourage stylish play, and that it has a bit more depth than people give it credit for. If it wasn't clear already, I am extremely biased towards this game, and I find it very, very fun. Yet, I actually agreed with the majority of the comments regarding this game's combat that I asked for in my responses. My Sonic Frontiers analogy from earlier rings true. This combat feels like a first draft of a new system. A very well done and clean first draft, but still a first draft nonetheless, missing a few extra things. So, how can we improve it for the hypothetical second attempt? As a quick note in advance, I won't be discussing enemy design. That's for a team of people smarter than me to sit down and talk about and design meticulously. The boss fights in this game are already amazing, but people want tougher basic enemies, and that's totally fair, but not something I'm going to spend time discussing. So, while the team figures out what they can do, let us work on what Clive should be able to do. Working through it piece by piece, we can start with the basics. Clive's base swordplay is honestly pretty good. His standard combo feels good to use, you can intertwine it with his magic burst for more damage, which takes a bit of timing practice. You can enemy step and dodge, there's a lunge and a down thrust option, as well as charge slashes for both grounded and aerial attacks, and is one of the best parry systems I've ever played. It's just a shame that, for all that I've said just now, there's really not that much to it. For all that I just said, there is just one standard combo, 2 if we include the magic bursts. I think expanding on this system would be a good place to start. I'll use Nero from Devil May Cry 5 as my base for study. 1 weapon, as I don't think Clive should have more than 1 weapon, but several ways to use it. Delayed button inputs for different combos, an enemy launcher that Clive can use himself without toggle, stuff like that. It's simple sounding, but anyone who's played Devil May Cry 5 will tell you just how good Nero feels to play, and I think we can try to recreate some of that magic in Final Fantasy XVI. I honestly feel like the development team took this kind of feedback on board when creating the DLCs, because the Leviathan and Ultima iconic feats both give you more ways to play the game, while your iconic strikes recharge, and they're perfectly viable in the gameplay. We just need to diversify base Clive's moveset now, or maybe even add more to the other icons. But I'm starting to talk too much, who could have seen that coming. So maybe we should switch gears to another talking point about the combat. After all, what is the whole reason for having variety in your combat? To style, of course. I've only made a video essay about the topic. Final Fantasy XVI has plenty of options, but it doesn't give you the most objective reasons to use them. So let's discuss how it could have done that better. And of course, who better to discuss Final Fantasy XVI style than...
Hey, how you guys doing? When I last appeared on Matt's channel, it was to provide insight as to why styling in Final Fantasy XVI still does matter, even if the game doesn't force you to do so. A styling allows you to really bring out the full potential of the combat, to fully engage with what the combat has to offer, and just how crazy you can get with it. And if you decide to do so, my goodness, does the combat shine. But let's flip that on its head now and look at the other perspective, why there should be extra incentive to style in a game that doesn't force you to. In my experience with Final Fantasy XVI, the combat can, in many ways, be seen as something that provides a diverse and flexible experience. But to really bring out its full potential, you have to push yourself to explore the nuances of the combat. Much like games such as Nier Automata, where the combat is built with the potential to style and experiment on a much deeper level if you want. Final Fantasy XVI is built the same way in that it doesn't give you an extrinsic reason why you should style, why you should do anything but the bare minimum, i.e. spamming square and cooldown dumping. And that's a problem because now people genuinely believe that that's the normal way to play, or in how I see a lot of people put it, the optimal way to play. When in reality, Final Fantasy XVI is all about letting the player choose how they want to play, which can be both great and also a detriment to people's enjoyment. As a solution to this, to add more extrinsic value in pushing yourself to style more, some people suggest the usual bringing over the style meter from the arcade modes into the base playthrough itself. And while this is a viable solution, while I would love to see this myself, I think there could be more creative ways to add that extrinsic value to styling that would serve to bolster the RPG elements of the combat. For instance, I think the more combos you pull off and the more stylish you get in combat should inherently reduce cooldown rates across the board. Similar to how parrying in the game reduces your cooldown rates with the icon you currently have channeled. And yes, parrying does reduce cooldown rates if you didn't know that. Additionally, if we were to replace the cooldown system altogether with the same idea in mind, the more stylish you become, instead of cooldowns you gain AP or MP, which you could then exchange to use your abilities, similar to the recent Expedition 33. This way, you're more incentivized to continuously combo and pressure enemies as much as possible, instead of just waiting for cooldowns to charge. Definitely definitely a much more intuitive system for this type of action combat than the cooldown system we have. Another thing that can serve to give that incentive to style while also maintaining the combo nature of 16 would be that the more you style, the better chance you have at pulling off team attacks with your party members. Similar to how the Yuffie DLC started the iteration of the synergy attacks in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, I honestly believe that at the very least, if Final Fantasy XVI wasn't going to include playable party members, they could follow suit with how the Yuffie DLC handled their synergy attacks. The more you style and chain together different abilities, the better chance you'll have to pull off a devastating unique attack with a party member of your choosing. A very similar idea to what you saw with the systems in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and how you would gain more charges the more abilities that you used. Also, think these crazy spectacle limit breaks along the lines with how Persona has their showtime attacks. I think the system could have really worked well with the fast-paced nature of 16's combat. You know, building up these crazy stylish combos, and the better combos that you do would build up AP or MP. And with that, you know, you'd have to really strategically plan, like, okay, what do I use my AP or MP charges on? Do I use it on my abilities, or do I bank all of my charges on this big team spectacle limit break? All in all, that is just the surface level of what I would want to include within the combat of Final Fantasy XVI as a huge fan of this game and the combat itself. You know, the thing is, Final Fantasy XVI does not have a bad combat system, but clearly it leaves a lot to be desired. To be the stylish action RPG Square Enix wants this to be. I think it could be so cool that Final Fantasy as a series is so willing to give us so many fresh experiences, even down to its combat system. However, it can also be seen as a major fumble by Square Enix in many ways, as they end up discarding combat systems every single game, without ever letting that team iterate on the great foundations we all know could be made better given another game that can iterate on it and the feedback that it receives. These combat systems are way too expensive and filled with so much potential to simply be given one game to shine in. And if Final Fantasy VII Remake has shown us anything, it's that the iteration of a specific formula goes a long way to finding success. And hopefully Square Enix doesn't forget that they have yet another strong foundation to build on for the future.
Once again, I couldn't have said that all any better myself. To add one extra point onto the end, perhaps some dynamic music, as suggested by the man himself, Night Sky Prince. In Devil May Cry 5, this was one of the greatest ideas ever. Music that gets better as you play better in the game, and it'd be just as great in Final Fantasy XVI. They have one of the greatest composers of all time on the team, so I know they'd be able to make this work, just for the battles in the dungeons and open world, mind you. The unique boss themes can stay right as they are already flawless. Regardless of any other critiques, the one thing that everyone agrees about Final Fantasy XVI is that the soundtrack goes fucking hard. There weren't too many comments about the game's iconic feats and iconic strikes. Most of us are in agreement that those are pretty awesome, but there was a fair bit of debate about the elements, or the lack thereof. Despite wielding so many iconic powers representing 8 or even 9 elements, there aren't any elemental reactions in this game, a staple of the Final Fantasy series up to this point. This one is kind of hard to include, yet I'd really like to see them give it a good try. The issues is that it could limit freedom of player expression, if each enemy has a set of elemental weaknesses that Clive would need to exploit in order to defeat them effectively. Worse still, it limits the variety of enemies that can be included in dungeons, seeing as you can only bring a total of 6 iconic strikes at a time, and there are 8 total elements, or 9 if you have some cash money on the side. In addition, we need to consider the various stages of the game that each enemy appears in. It wouldn't do to have an enemy that resists fire while you only have Phoenix and Garuda, now would it? The positives to adding these reactions, however, are that they could increase combo potential. Imagine a Shiva and Leviathan build, where you can drench enemies with water and then freeze them with your ice attacks, based on the elemental reaction. Imagine if you could then melt the frozen enemies with fire for extra damage. Or perhaps the drenched enemies would take extra damage from Ramuh's lightning attacks, and the shocks could chain from enemy to enemy. Basically, this proposal is just to turn Final Fantasy XVI's combat system into Genshin Impact, and just go all out with the elemental reactions, at least on minor enemies and mini-bosses. Leave the big bosses largely as it is so they don't become trivialized. The other proposal is a bit more of a subtle one, that just being minor effects and reactions to both elemental magic shots and the actual iconic strikes. Water, earth, and ice could perhaps slow down basic enemies. Wind attacks could have more knockback to them. Fire and light attacks could have damage over time from the burning. Perhaps dark enemies then take more damage from light, and light enemies take more damage from dark. Just stuff like that. I'm only throwing around ideas. Smarter people than me would come up with better systems, but hey, at least I'm putting it out there into the world for their consideration. If we have status effects on the enemies, we should have them on Clive. Basically, I'm saying just add in poison. Poison mist should poison you. It'd make the plants in the wild more threatening, it'd make the flippy ninjas even more dangerous, and it could make for potential environmental hazards if developers were that way inclined. No, Miyazaki, no, you can't come, no, back! You can't put a poison swamp in Final Fantasy XVI. Hey, no, get back up. Back to your cave. Fuck, that was close. That man has some weird obsessions. Depending on how Clive's powers work in the lore, I wouldn't mind a shock system like Black Myth Wukong, where you just take extra damage while the status effect is active. But if absorbing Cid's lightning makes Clive resistant to lightning, then that doesn't make sense and it would be gameplay and story dissonance. Game theory? Confirm how his powers work for me. This is a small category, yeah, but not everything needs an essay. This is a simple concept. Add in status effects like burning and poison, add in antidotes, and then give some of your iconic strikes the ability to cure status effects. And maybe add in Toad as well, because it'd be funny. The crafting system in this game is admittedly bare bones. Personally, I'm a big fan of getting fancy new gear, and I love the various sword designs in this game, as well as their little pieces of lore, but having them actually do things would have been even better. We get all these sick elemental swords. What if they buffed their respective icons while you wielded them? Adding a new layer to their feats like those accessories from the Rising Tide, or maybe even just a blanket buff to the iconic strikes, whether that be on their damage or on their cooldown. What if they added a third upgrade to each iconic's ultimate attack, like an AoE burst after Giga Flare, or a rain of fiery tracking phoenix feathers after you do Flames of Rebirth? Again, I'm just spitballing my Final Fantasy fantasies. If we introduced our elemental reaction system, these swords could perhaps carry those elements by default, letting you do extra damage without the need for using your iconic strikes. Perhaps some swords could add extra damage to aerial attacks, or decrease your charge rate for the magic burst. Long story short, just make them do something. For the special swords, the fancy iconic ones, make it something like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. All the weapons have different stats, specialties, advantages, and disadvantages, but they can all be viable in different ways at different times, and the special icon blades should be the same way, as well as the craftable in-game weapons. Though, leave us the ability to change our weapon skin to whatever we want. That was one of the best features added in post-launch. Finally, for the Ultima weapon, Omega weapon, and Original Sin, I don't really know. Just do all of what I said, but more of it. And give Original Sin its tip. Oh, what about the armor? Well, I don't really have an issue with this. The armor can just be flat stats and basic resistances. It doesn't even appear on Clive. Just let the accessories be more unique, like they are in Echoes of the Fallen and the Rising Tide DLCs. See, the team were learning with the DLCs. It's just a shame they didn't have more time to take it even further. Give us Final Fantasy mode as a standard difficulty option, and give us Ultimaniac as a New Game Plus option. This is self-explanatory. The base game is evidently too easy, or at least too easy for players to need to style and experiment to overcome the challenges, leaving a more negative impression of the combat system. This wouldn't even be a hard change. I'm surprised they didn't do this in a post-game update. Did they just want the Platinum Trophy to take longer with the mandatory second playthrough? And this last point is just my personal petty indulgence. Ultima's iconic abilities are an in-game reward for a DLC. They should be stronger than the others in some way. Perhaps they always have an elemental advantage against enemies or something, but their cooldowns are longer to compensate. I don't know, I just think Ultima's moves should have been a little more standout, beyond just the gorgeous aesthetics of Blue Fire. I adore the combat of Final Fantasy XVI. It's the second best part of the game to me. I love getting better at the various mechanics, experimenting with all the different moves. Very few games have made combat as awesome and aesthetically pleasing as this game does. All it needs is a bit more depth. Like I said, it feels like a first draft for the combat, and like Limitless said, it'd be a crying shame if Square Enix abandoned this combat system after only one game trying it out. With the Rising Tide DLC, it really feels like the team was starting to find their flow with the combat system, no pun intended, with the icons giving more variety to your standard gameplay instead of just extra moves with cooldowns, and enemies having more varied conditions and requirements to defeat them, like the purple magic barriers. So imagine what they could do with a complete second attempt at it with all of this feedback. We could have something on the level of Devil May Cry. Like, one of the good ones, I mean. Another contentious point of Final Fantasy XVI is the party members. Not so much the characters themselves. Gav is great, Uncle Byron is great, Shula is nice, Sid is fantastic, Joshua is fantastic, and Jill is a national treasure. But their utilization in the game itself isn't the greatest. They don't really do anything when you're playing. You can't play as them, and while that's something I'd love, that's not something I'm adding to my suggestion board. Not right now, at least. Final Fantasy XV was a divisive game, that much is clear, but perhaps its greatest strength was the party. Ignis, Gladio, and Prompto really felt like your friends because you got to know them. They talked to you throughout your journey, not just in the story quests, but when you're just exploring the world and the dungeons. They helped you out in combat. You could even play as them from time to time. It really helped build your bond with your bros. Final Fantasy XVI needs more of that. On a surface level, more party banter. Please. This was even a critique of mine on my first playthrough, the near silence of the characters outside of story-based dungeon crawls. They have good banter, so why not let us have more of it? When you enter a town, depending on different parts of the game, let the characters comment on it. They could talk about how they're glad to be back at Martha's Rest after a long journey. They can reassure each other as they travel through Ash. They can comment on the resistance efforts in Delamil. Just small talk, you know? But maybe you're not a fan of random background chit-chat, so instead, how about having them be more talkative with the side quests? They do this a little bit already, but not nearly enough. Have them comment on things that you're doing. I know why the developers didn't do this. What if the player doesn't have Joshua or Jill with them as they do the side quests? Well, then just have two options. One that plays if you have the companion in question, and another that plays if you don't. It's hardly a radical idea. Or, better yet, just have Joshua and Jill be a mandatory part of the group in the endgame. But we'll talk about that later in the video. Like Night Sky said as well, let your companions talk to you more during combat as you do sick combos. I know they already kind of do that, but have it be louder and actually discernible in the middle of battle. This is a very fun group with good dynamics. I just wish we got to hear more of them talking to each other, especially with their stellar voice acting. And speaking of party members in combat, let them actually do something significant. To go back to Final Fantasy XV, Link strikes. It's not like the L1 button does much at the moment anyway. Change lock-on to L3 or R3 and have L1 be your button to control the party members. Imagine if Clive and Jill could wreak havoc together as a team with fire and ice. Call that freezer burn or something. Or perhaps Joshua and Clive can team up as the two brothers of fire, coating the battlefield in flames of destruction and creation. Or Sid being the Chad that he is, doing all the moves he does in the cutscenes but at your command. For Jill, I imagine her having the ability to freeze enemies. Sid can paralyze them with lightning, and Joshua is of course bringing the heat, and maybe even healing you, seeing as he is the Phoenix and healing is his most established ability. Yes, they may be able to do some of this by themselves, but let us actually make our party members do this on command. It would build so much more rapport with our companions if we actually felt like we were fighting with them as a team, instead of just kind of fighting next to them separately. We already get to command Torgal, so what's the harm in giving us a few more things to do? Dedicated synergy attacks like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has would be even more awesome, but I understand if they would perhaps be a little too flashy and stationary for this style of game. Maybe even allow some customization for the companions. A new set of accessories that allows you to enhance their abilities, increase their damage, increase their healing ability, give them special attacks, basically all the stuff you could do in Final Fantasy XV, but with some depth adjusted for a more action-focused game. At least save that for Jill and Joshua, the mainstays of your party in the endgame. If we can't have playable party members, at least make them feel engaged in the combat loop more. We are diverting away from the balanced combat that allows for arcade scoring with all this talk, but who cares? We already have the Kairos Gate for people to flex their ability on others in a balanced, one-size-fits-all, standard-setting combat arena. Let's focus on having fun and making this game feel like a real power fantasy. A Final Fantasy. Ow. Before we get into the two final talking points of this video, let me just address a couple of quickfire suggestions. Let us put Clive's hood up. Yes, absolutely, 100%. More skins for the characters would have been amazing, just an extra one or two, maybe even unlockable in-game. It was already great getting the free ones with the September update, and Clive's hood being up is already a thing more than once in this game, so it's not like it has no prerequisite for existing. A prequel chapter with Cid and Benedicta. Yes, this game should have had more things like Final Fantasy XV. Where's the animated prologues? Where's the novelization? Where's the cup noodles? Okay, maybe not that last part. And hell, if we got that chapter as playable, and we got playable Cid, goddamn, that's a $1 million DLC right there. Make us fight more in the blighted zones. I agree with this too, to an extent. We get introduced to a zone where we can't use magic, the characters even call this out. Ooh, exciting. I guess we're gonna have to do some combat there then, relying on our swords instead of our spells. Yes, you get one combat encounter in this zone in the entire game, against a small handful of goblins in the DLC. See, I'd agree that it would be a fun challenge to have more fights without your magic, but it'd also get tedious if it was overused, so I think that it's best that we use this idea in moderation. More Uncle Byron. Oh, most definitely. Give us a minigame. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Wait, no. No! Not like that. Just one or two small deviations to the standard gameplay loop in the open world, with a minigame or two that are used sparingly. Frankly, with how good Ambrosia feels to control and with the boost system that she has, I'm amazed that there's no chocobo racing. I'd gladly accept a little bit of that here, but only a little bit. Adjust the character animations during dialogue segments. This is purely a personal complaint, but whenever there's a long talking segment outside of a cutscene, the character animations feel so stiff. Like the way they might walk, the way they shift on their feet or fold their arms, it feels very much like a video game. Obviously you can't have unique animations for every minor dialogue, but games like Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, and The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt never had this problem for me. They also make use of a limited set of animations, but they make the characters feel a lot less static as they talk, so let's try to implement the same sort of thing in Final Fantasy XVI. Also, fully record all the lines during these conversations. Why are the characters only saying the first couple of words and then we have to read the rest? I want to hear more of this amazing voice cast, not less. And someone said to turn Clive into Diabolos before the final boss. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but a Clive wielding the power of the devil sounds pretty nice. Okay, on to the final two major categories. We're officially halfway there. Only halfway there. Honestly, I didn't think we'd be talking about the story in this video. This is one of my favorite stories in fiction history, and Clive is the GOAT. Then I took about 5 seconds to think about it and realized,
life is good, but it can be better.
Thank you all for your thoughts on this. I got a lot of comments, and I've used them to draft up points for my commentary. First of all, more Jill. Are we expecting anything else? Give Jill more of a chance to shine in the story. Fantastic character, and I love her relationship with Clive, but I want to see more of her kicking ass. She should have done more in the battle against the Liquid Flame. For example, what if you could build up a meter that lets you use a special attack from Shiva, dropping ice spikes from the sky, putting the Liquid Flame into permafrost, stuff like that. Oh, Jill's too busy blocking the lava to help. My brother in Ultima, you wrote the story. Just change how it goes. One commenter even suggested a controllable Shiva. That would have been awesome, but I can see how making a second icon with actual combat could have been hard on the development team. I understand Jill's screen time and power displays are limited by the Crystal Curse, but that's not conveyed that prominently outside of us being told about it. You can't even see it on her body, and we see pretty much all of said body. Either make the curse a bigger deal to justify her limitations, or give us more Jill moments in the story. Again, they crafted a brilliant character, we just need to see more of her. Next point. Clive's mum is the actual worst. This bitch sold out her own kingdom, her husband, and her sons, just so she could fulfill her delusional duty. And everything came crashing down around her anyway. She's a compelling villain for the first 2/3 of the game, but some people actually want to see more of her, if you can believe it. And I'm in agreement. Perhaps more screen time showing off her political machinations, some further explanation into her backstory. Nothing will ever justify what she did. but it'd be nice to expand more into the why she did it. I agree, there's more nuance to Annabella than meets the eye. The next point was an interesting one, and it made me realize something. We never fight a sane icon, unless you count Ultima Risen. Garuda, lost control. Titan, lost control. Bahamut, lost control. Leviathan, lost control. Odin, in a cutscene. Hotel, Travago. This is a minor point, but it could have been nice to have at least Titan keep his mind during the icon fight, allowing for more Hugo shit-talking during the fight. I agree with you here, noble commenter. This next point is less story content and more story execution, and that is the removal of some story quests, making them into side quests. It's not like they had a problem with stuffing the game full of side quests anyway, and I've done all of them twice over, so I can say that. The quests with Mid, building her workshop and building her engines, they're a commonly agreed on low point of this game. The actual story around them is fine, I doubt anyone would argue against that, but they grind the pace of the game to such a halt, and they're not particularly memorable gameplay wise. You don't need to face an epic boss to acquire wood for a workspace after all. So take a few liberties with trimming out some of this main quest. It's okay for some things to just happen off screen or in a cutscene. Not to say those quests are completely without merit. I mean, going shopping with Jill, that conversation with her by the water was beautiful. But there are certainly ways to put that in the game without the accompanying fetch quests and tedium, you know? Additionally, all the detours we take for the towns and settlements, running errands for them, it can feel like busy work. Granted, it's necessary on many occasions, such as first getting introduced to the towns and their people, or checking up on them after Primogenesis, but things like finding Goots's Pass and Boklad, was this really necessary to gatekeep progression? A glaring example I'll give on how side content or bloated story quests can affect pacing is after Jill gets captured by Barnabas. She is on a ship being taken to Ash, the second landmass of the Twins where the game takes place. At that point, all side quests should be locked, and we should be going straight for her rescue. You can get back to them once she's saved. This is a narrative misstep that can't really be ignored.
Oh no, Jill, the love of my life. She's been captured by my worst enemy. I must save her. But first I need to do all these side quests that only now just popped up at this point of the game. Jill will be fine.
See how that's kinda dumb? Altered proposal. Put the bit with finding the secret in the jukebox earlier in the game, and then have us jump straight onto the ship, with a blacksmith and merchant in the cove in case we need to restock or craft weapons right after the Canver mission. It's not like we need to worry about being too weak to face the boss on the ship. It's a mandatory loss. Alright, next point. Barnabas should have had more focus. This I can agree on. He hardly shows up until the final third of the game. Yes, you can see glimpses of him playing chessmaster, but we want more than glimpses. Man is aura farming, but he's only on screen for a handful of minutes. Some people even suggested replacing Ultima with Barnabas as the big bad of the story. I wouldn't quite go that far, but I would be curious to see how that story would look, seeing Barnabas' worldview against Clive's as the main driving point of the conflict. Some commenters even left very interesting ideas for this plotline, which you can pause the video to read now. This last point is one of my own making. Make Origin less of an immediate threat in the narrative. What I mean is, we're told Origin, the big sky mother crystal, is accelerating the spread of the Blight and draining the world of Ether even faster, causing more Ether floods and more Akashic, which then makes the bajillion side quests we get immediately after its appearance feel kind of pointless in the grand scheme of things. Writers, maybe alter the scenario so we don't feel like with every side quest we complete we're wasting precious time. Maybe Origin isn't draining Ether as fast as the other Mother Crystals, so we can afford to take care of things down here before the endgame. You can't even say this is just a side quest issue. Both game DLCs canonically take place during this time period. Origin doesn't feel threatening when we would, in story, do this many side quests and activities before the final battle. The thing is, the side quests do ultimately serve a point in the narrative, beyond just saving people. The stronger Clive's bonds are to other people, the stronger his resistance to Ultima's control. Simply put, explain that plot point in more straight up terms, explain that Origin isn't as immediate of a threat as before, and have the premise be Clive wanting to strengthen himself and his bonds before the final battle, as well as just help out the world. The power of friendship, like Persona. And speaking of side quests, you all knew this was coming. The final point on our list, and the final point on everyone's lists, the side quests. Modern Final Fantasy side quests are a point of contention. It's been that way since Final Fantasy XV. That game's quests were...
I need you to go find my mango, you fucking
Now, full disclaimer, and this might just be because I am a quote-unquote soulless consumer woke corporate shill beta male, but I still mostly enjoy all of these side quests. As long as the characters I love get to run around, talk to each other, and do cool things, I am happy to play as many side quests as these games ask of me. At least I am the first time around. Once the unique experience is worn off, then they start to drag, and that was the case with Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it is also the case with Final Fantasy XVI. As I've said before, the side quests for Final Fantasy XVI are settings for world building and character growth. You learn cool facts about the world, whether that be secret world history, fun facts about people and cultures. It's honestly a joy to find out more about these because the world of Valisthea is extremely interesting. It's just a shame that, well, the gameplay of these side quests is about as bare bones as you can get. It's not a matter of Clive just delivering food to people in the various hideaways. You can feel the MMO roots of the game when you play through these. Don't get me wrong, some of these quests are fantastic, evoking emotion with story moments for positive or negative reasons, and providing fun combat encounters to go with them. For Great Justice, Duty Undying, Under New Management, Litany of Errors, Trading Places, More Than Words, Silver Lining, Where There's a Will, Priceless, all quests and quest lines carrying a worthy story and emotional beats with beloved characters, and there are quite a few more that I didn't mention. Plus, if you didn't feel anything when you played All Bark and Playthings, those quests in the Sandbrick Meadows before the time skip, you're dead inside. Finding Chloe. Fuck, that was a gut punch. But I'm not going to pretend that the vast bulk of these side quests are largely busywork. Fetch quests with cool lore, but fetch quests is all they are. We can do better than that. Let us look to the past for an example. The Witcher 3. One of the greatest games ever made, and that game's greatest strength might just be its side content. The quests are full of branching paths, choices that can actually matter, all things you'd want in an RPG. You can wander the world and find tons of encounters, small and large, that are completely optional, but they make the world feel so alive, and it feels like we have actual agency in what we do. I'd like to see that in Final Fantasy XVI as well. Let's give the players a little more freedom to decide the path that Clive takes. I mean, it's only side content. It's not like we can lock ourselves out of the main story's ending. We get brief glimpses of this here and there, maybe some extra dialogue choices, but we should have more straight up player choice and have some lasting consequences to go with it. I remember in Final Fantasy VII, you could straight up lock yourself out of having Yuffie or Vincent on your team forever if you pick the wrong dialogue when you find them. That's pretty ballsy, and I'm not sure that's what we want here, but it's the idea that counts. This is meant to be a role-playing game after all. Baldur's Gate 3 came out the same year and practically redefined the genre. We've had choices and consequences in Final Fantasy XV, and basically every other one before that. So why not expand on it instead of stripping it back? A quest in particular I want to bring up is Cut from the Cloth, a quest that takes place after the Drake's Breath part of the game. After you complete the quest, you get to choose your favorite out of 3 different fabrics of different colors, and later in the game, Jill gives you a handkerchief that she made for you out of said fabric. It's very sweet. It'd be nice if we could actually see it though, you know? Like, not having to go into the menu. Couldn't it be displayed with the rest of Clive's mementos in his room? Or maybe even have him wear it as part of his outfit? But that's just a nitpick. Point is that player choice is good, so long as it matters in some tangible way. This is side content, let us have some fun with it. Here's a great example I happened to find on Reddit regarding the Trial and Error quest. See? Reddit can be useful after all. Now, I know what you might say. It'd be too hard for them to do that much detail with so many side quests. Okay, valid point. So, get rid of half of them.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Less is more. Fewer side quests, but better side quests is the way to go. Yes, The Witcher 3 has 50 billion of them, but we're being reasonable here. We spent most of our budget on the icon fights. So many of these quests, while they were good at building story and character, could have just not needed to happen if they were going to be this uninteresting, relatively speaking. Everything with a plus sign can stay, as well as all the side quests I name dropped earlier, but a lot of these delivery quests, these lesser fetch quests with no notable story substance, they can be removed for a smoother gameplay experience. I will not miss them too much. That being said, the truly excellent side quests should be promoted from their current status and put in the main story. More Than Words with Torgal, Where There's a Will with Joshua, and Priceless with Jill. These are all too important to leave up to player choice. Considering the latter two are mandatory for you to take part in the DLCs, it only makes sense to make them a bigger deal to the players. I'm not asking for much, just those 3, my personal 3 favourite side quests in the whole game. Though, if we're developing side quests, we may as well develop the hunts while we're at it. Again, The Witcher 3 is my main source of inspiration, because those Witcher contracts are fantastic. Instead of just a notice board that gives us a clue on where to find the monsters, expand these into mini side quests. Let us talk to witnesses, let us track down the monsters, and help us expand on the story of these creatures, and the world, while making the actual hunts themselves a little more engaging. They can help make up the numbers of all the side quests we chopped off in our earlier point. Perhaps even just have some of these targets roaming the world, and let us encounter them by ourselves at random, as suggested by this commenter here. Recall the Emerald Weapon from Final Fantasy VII. You're just wandering around the ocean depths when boom, you've run into a super boss. Or the Ultimate Weapon, flying around the skies like it just didn't care for you to find of your own volition. Again, this is side content. It's okay to get a bit adventurous and make the players work to find the rewards. And speaking of getting adventurous, the open world of Final Fantasy XVI could perhaps use a tweak. I noticed quite a few people asking for bigger cities to explore, and I think this could be cool. People spoke of visiting Oriflamme, to give an example, and I agree, it would have been nice to see the actual big city, rather than only having these smaller settlements of Northreach or Martha's Rest to explore. At least one large populated area would have made the world feel a bit more alive. Optional dungeons and stages as well, that's something that the game lacks, unless you count the DLC and the Sage Spire as an optional dungeon, which I don't. In Final Fantasy XV, you had a bunch of them that you could just ignore and come back to at your leisure, so I don't see why we couldn't have 1 or 2 in this game. The dungeons/stages are full of the game's finest crafted combat encounters and their epic boss fights, so no one would be unhappy about having more of them. And if we need to explore and put in extra legwork to unlock them, it'll just make the rewards inside all the sweeter. And what would wait for us at the end of these optional dungeons? Why, the optional super bosses, of course. Myself and others believe that this game deserves a true optional challenge at the end of it in the form of some sort of dangerous foe. Not an icon fight, you don't want those to be missable, something to push your skills with Clive to the very limit. DLCs don't count, because Omega and Leviathan definitely fit the bill for super bosses. I'm talking about something like Svarog or Atlas, the most powerful hunts, but even more formidable. Using our new party attack system, the revamped elemental reaction combat, and the greater focus on unique gameplay over arcade mode balance that we've discussed earlier in this video, we can create an enemy that is a true challenge for anyone brave enough to take it on. A high-level, multi-phase, demanding optional boss fight, tied to the end of a side quest or a hunt, with an opening and ending cutscene requiring your entire party to help you take down. You know, small stuff like that. I know it's a little harder to do with this action-based combat system, but killing the weapons in Final Fantasy VII, fighting the optional VR super bosses or Gilgamesh in the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, killing the Adamantoise and Omega in Final Fantasy XV, those moments felt damn special. I want Final Fantasy XVI to give that same feeling with its final optional enemy, right before you go off to settle the score with God himself. Make no mistake, despite all the critique I've just given, I love Final Fantasy XVI. It's forever one of my favorite games of all time, an extremely influential game on my life, and I will be grateful for its existence for the rest of time. However, just because we love something, doesn't mean we can't critique it in the hopes of making things better for the future. All of my favorite games have areas to be improved on. I'm not just bashing Final Fantasy XVI for the sake of it. As Limitless would agree on, hell, as most people featured in this video would agree on, we just want to see a great game become even better, in the way that a Final Fantasy game certainly can. I've said a lot, and I know little of game development, budget restrictions, or the other problems that stop developers from turning their dreams into reality within this medium. But the ideas we've come up with are free, and they could be used to inspire workarounds, different priorities while making the game, ways to make extremely fun experiences, while defying the limits that would stop us. That's kinda how video games are meant to work, no? Ultimately, Final Fantasy XVI feels stuck between two worlds, an action game or an RPG, and trying to incorporate both has made it suffer the same weaknesses while not fully capitalizing on either of their strengths. But I think, instead of trying to hard commit to one side or the other to try to fix itself, it should take aspects of both genres and use them to build a brand new identity to define its place in gaming history. Or at least that's what Square Enix should do with Final Fantasy XVII, probably coming out in 2031 or something. And with that, it's all over. The second year anniversary of Final Fantasy XVI has come and gone, and the game is now on every platform imaginable. Oi, Play Final Fantasy XVI. Contrary to the naysayers, this game will live on in the wider gaming culture as a subject of discussion, praise, criticism, and inspiration. Look at Tides of Annihilation and tell me you don't see the similarities with a straight face. I'm not sure what the future holds for that game regarding content on my channel, but I'm sure I'll think of something. I am a little bit of a Final Fantasy XVI fan after all. Thank you so much to everyone who replied to my tweet with their thoughts and ideas about this game for the purposes of this video. I expected like 3 people, and I got closer to 100. That was mind-blowing, and I hope I adequately gave a voice to the community in a satisfying way through this video. I don't think Square Enix is going to take this video and the points contained within as inspiration for their next Final Fantasy game. After all, I don't think they listen to YouTubers with under 1 million subscribers. However, I hope that this video was fun regardless, even just as a thought experiment. It's always fun to talk about things that we love, especially when those things are awesome video games. Special thank you to Limitless for once again coming onto the channel to talk about one of our favorite games. Make sure to check out his channel for all the best in RPG and action game news and reviews, as well as some seriously stylish gameplay on the side.
Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you made it this far. Listen, Final Fantasy XVI is not only one of my favorite Final Fantasy games, but one of my favorite games of all time. So of course, all of these critiques come from a place of love and hundreds of hours playing the game. I've always said in a lot of my previous videos that one of Final Fantasy's biggest problems currently is constantly reinventing the wheel. And because of that, these games never get to perfect their formula. They get to create the first draft of what can be considered a masterpiece with just one more iteration. Again, when you look at the Final Fantasy VII remakes, it becomes clear why this is so important. Why iteration on an existing and familiar formula can serve to unite the fanbase rather than alienate. And you know, I hope that with this video, we have hammered home that point. To build on a good first draft and maybe some things that weren't as good so that your next game is just that much better. Anyways, with all of that said, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to MattTGM and all of his incredible deep dives, ranking, and platinum videos here. And feel free to hop on over to my channel where we cover anything from gaming news, reviews, and deep dives into some incredible RPGs. And with that, it is back to your host.
And seeing as we're currently giving a lot of thanks, thank you all so much for the support on my Doom boss ranking. Seeing numbers like these after 6 months of trying and failing is so inspiring. That brought hope back to my channel when I was starting to lose it. You guys definitely want more boss rankings, and I will be sure to give them to you as soon as I can. My next video will be coming up in July, and it's a sequel that has been long anticipated, the 42 Platinums video. Granted, the hype has long since been lost, but hey, when I promise a project, I make sure to deliver on the goods. Most of the time. Sometimes. Occasionally. If you like this video, smash that like button with the fury of an icon, and if you want to see more, please subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to hit 4,000 subscribers by the end of 2025, and with the recent boost from my Doom video, we may just be able to pull it off. If you think that I've earned it, you can check out my Patreon as well for your name in the credits, early access to videos, and perhaps a little bit more. With all that said, I think we're done here. Thank you all for watching, and thus did our journey end.